Welcome to the History app. Let's talk about Nicaea in 1097.
Ah, Nicaea. Modern Iznik in Turkey.
Right. And back then, a really important Byzantine city, well, it had been. The Seljuk Turks took it.
They did. Made it their capital, didn't they? The Sultanate of Rum, carved out right there in Anatolia.
Yeah, a big deal. But then, 1097, suddenly it's smack bang in the path of the First Crusade.
And you have to picture this place strategically vital, right on Lake Ascania, Lake Iznik now.
They'd held it since, 1081? So it was really the heart of Seljuk power in that whole area.
Exactly. So when tens of thousands of crusaders rock up, well, it's a major confrontation waiting to happen.
Tens of thousands. Just think about moving that many people, feeding them. They arrive probably low on supplies, but very determined.
And look who's leading them. Godfrey of Bouillon, Bohemond of Tarento, Raymond of Toulouse. These are major figures.
You get big names, yeah. So they get there May 14th and surround the city, and it's seriously fortified, something like 200 towers.
200. That tells you something about its importance, right?
Yeah.
A formidable obstacle for this Crusader army. It's their first major siege.
You'd think the Sultan would be right there, defending his capital. But here's the twist.
He's not there.
Not even close. The Sultan, Kilich Arslan, he's off fighting somewhere else entirely.
Which sounds, well, like a massive blunder in hindsight.
Totally. He'd crushed the earlier People's Crusade, right? So he probably thought, another disorganized mob.
He underestimated this main force.
Terribly. And People's Crusade was much less organized. So maybe, you can see his thinking, but still.
So he's off east, trying to grab Melitene, dealing with rivals like the Danishmends.
Leaving his family, and crucially, his treasury in Nicaea.
The whole treasury. Talk about miscalculating the threat. It really shows you, doesn't it, how fragmented things were and how maybe fighting the last war blinded him.
That underestimation is key. Plus, Seljuk power wasn't absolute. These internal rivalries, like with the Danishmends, were a constant drain on resources and attention. Melitene was important, sure, but Nicaea. Right. So the Crusaders are outside, they start the siege, but pretty quickly hit a snag.
The lake.
Exactly. Lake Ascania. The Turks could still get supplies in by boat, like a backdoor delivery service.
Which makes a siege way harder. You have to control all the access points.
So the Crusaders are trying things. Direct assaults, they damage a tower with a siege engine, maybe a trebuchet or something.
A mangonel, possibly. Standard siege stuff.
They even try mining under the walls. But it's not working. The defenses are holding. It's frustrating for them.
Sieges were often like that.
Yeah.
Long, grinding affairs. And Nicaea's defenses plus that lake access made it particularly tough.
Okay, so meanwhile, word finally gets back to Kilich Arslan, like, hey, boss, this is actually a really big army.
He realizes he messed up. Big time.
So he rushes back, brings a relief force, maybe 10,000 troops, mostly mounted archers, their specialty.
A significant force. Skilled cavalry. But the Crusaders met them.
Head on, and apparently it was fierce fighting. Really bloody.
Heavy losses on both sides, the accounts say. But, crucially,
the Crusaders won. They beat him, forced him to retreat, even though the guys inside Nicaea were begging him not to leave.
That was huge. It proved they could defeat a major Seljuk field army. A massive confidence boost, you have to imagine.
Absolutely. Showed Kilich Arslan this wasn't the People's Crusade Mark II. This was serious military power.
And it showed the Crusaders could work together despite being, different groups under different leaders. They achieved a major tactical victory.
But just when you think, okay, Crusaders win, city falls, plot twist, enter the Byzantine Emperor Alexios III. He's been watching kind of cautiously from a distance, and he has his own ideas.
Always. Alexios was playing the long game.
So first, he deals with the lake problem. He gets ships somehow dragged overland to Lake Ascania.
Which is just an incredible feat of engineering and determination. Blockades the lake completely.
Cuts off that last supply line. Smart move. But then, the really sneaky part.
He starts talking to the Turks inside Nicaea. Secretly.
Behind the Crusaders' backs. He negotiates the city's surrender directly with the defenders.
Because his goal wasn't just helping the crusade. It was getting Nicaea back for the Byzantine Empire. It was his city, historically speaking.
Right. It shows that complex political game being played alongside the military stuff.
Absolutely. He needed the Crusaders, but he also distrusted them and wanted to control the outcome for Byzantine benefit.
So, June 19th, the city surrenders, but the Byzantine flags go up, not the Crusaders.
And the Crusaders are, understandably, furious.
Yeah. They've done the bleeding and the fighting for weeks. They're expecting to sack the city. That was a standard practice. The reward, get supplies, get rich.
The spoils of war. A major motivation for many, let's be honest, alongside the religious reasons.
But nope. Alexios says, thanks, but no thanks. They're only allowed inside in small, supervised groups. No looting allowed.
Look, but don't touch. Imagine the frustration, the resentment towards Alexios must have spiked right there.
For sure. Now, the Byzantines did try to smooth things over a bit.
Damage control.
They gave out gifts, money, horses, supplies, which was needed, but...
Not quite the same as the riches they thought they'd won.
And then the final string attached. Alexios makes the Crusader leaders swear oaths of loyalty to him, if they hadn't already.
An oath of vassalage. Basically promising to return any former Byzantine lands they captured.
Even Tancred, who was famously independent, apparently had to give in eventually.
That oath was vital for Alexios. It was his way of trying to assert control, to make them act, at least in theory, in his interests. Tancred holding out shows the tension, though.
So end of June, June 26th, the Crusaders finally march out of Nicaea.
Goal achieved. Nicaea is back in Christian hands, Byzantine hands, specifically.
But you gotta think they left with mixed feelings. Happy to have won, maybe, but definitely annoyed at Alexios.
And maybe a little naive about what lay ahead. You mentioned Stephen of Blois.
Oh yeah, he wrote to his wife Adele saying they'd be in Jerusalem in 5 weeks.
5 weeks, wow. Shows the optimism, maybe the relief after Nicaea.
Yeah.
But wildly inaccurate.
Yeah, it took them another 2 years, and their next big fight was just around the corner at Dorylaeum.
Dorylaeum would be a very different battle, a real shock.
So looking back at Nicaea, it's just a fascinating snapshot, isn't it?
Definitely. You see the Crusader motivations, faith, yes, but also clearly the desire for gain.
You see the Byzantine agenda reclaiming territory, managing these powerful, unpredictable Westerners.
And you see the Seljuks, initially overconfident, then fighting hard but ultimately outmaneuvered, partly by Byzantine diplomacy.
It all crashes together there, and the outcome wasn't quite what the guys doing the fighting expected.
It really highlights that question, doesn't it? In any big undertaking with multiple groups, multiple agendas, whose interests actually win out?
Yeah. And how do those clashing goals shape what actually happens on the ground? And Nicaea really set a precedent, I think.
It did. It established a pattern of cooperation, yes, but also underlying tension and mistrust between the Crusaders and Byzantines.
Something that would definitely continue all the way to Jerusalem and beyond.
Indeed. A complex beginning to a long and complicated journey.